Awesome. Thanks for joining today. I'm going to walk through a little presentation on progress reports and a little bit of a change to how we're doing some scoring this year. And then, I notice I have a lot of fifth grade families, and I do have a little specific section on fifth grade and what looks different for you all as we prepare for middle school applications. But I wanted to start by thinking about I have our agenda. We're going to talk about what a progress report is versus a report card. And we're going to think about what our new 5 point scale looks like and why it's important. And I've tried to proactively think of some questions you might ask and then have some time for you to ask questions at the end. But I was thinking back to what progress reports and report cards looked like when I was in elementary school. And I invite you to sort of just take a moment and think about what your elementary school report might have looked like, how often you got them, how the scoring was. And as I was thinking about this, I was remembering that I think my first reports just had smiley faces. They were like smiley face, neutral face, sad face. So they didn't have a lot of description. And as I got older, I can even remember in elementary school bringing home reports that said like good, very good, not good, and they just had little letter abbreviations. And so as I've been a teacher for many years and now an administrator reading through reports, I've just been reflecting on the growth and change over time of what reports look like and what kids are looking for in terms of feedback and what parents are looking for in terms of feedback. So I thought that was just kind of a funny story to think about as we moved through this presentation. So I wanted to start with really talking about a report card versus a progress report. I actually have always called them report cards, and Peter has been challenging me this year to really use the word progress report because it is what we do here at Meridian. But a report card is different because it's a really specific summary. It's kind of like the end period. We're done with what we're doing. We're defining the growth and where a student has gone. It's very focused on performance. It's kind of final. So we think of report cards in that way of traditional grading, one assessment that defines what a student can show in one sitting. But at Meridian, we really focus on progress reports. I think this image really represented what I was trying to present was that there's a lot of different checkpoints along the way. A progress report is one of the checkpoints, but I think of parent-teacher conferences as a checkpoint where we really talk about how students are doing. Progress reports are designed to show the journey that a student is taking over the course of the year. They focus on the skills that students are learning. They talk about how instruction is set up and guided. They're a guide not just for parents and students, but also for teachers to refer back to think about where each student is headed on their journey of learning. And I think this is a great connection because as I've been exploring my time here back at Meridian, I think of learning as a journey, and I've been sharing with prospective parents about the journey that elementary school is, which is the first steps. And so a lot of learning for kids is supported by teachers. Elementary school teachers are here to support students in a variety of ways. It's hard to think we would expect 5-year-olds to master things, or even our 11-year-olds. There's so much learning ahead of them. And so progress reports are just one of the ways that we communicate with you how your student is progressing. So we spent a lot of time as a staff last year thinking about progress reports and what is communicated to families. And we, as a staff, really felt it was important to shift the way that we were going to do scoring and grading on those more documented reports. Um, we wanted to move away from the more traditional report card language about needing improvement or at standard or below standard because we wanted to define what level of independence a student needed or what level of independence a student was at across skills. Oftentimes, the skills that we are um, working with students on last all year. And so we want to see how they grow over the course of a year, not over the course of a short period of time. And we want you as families to be able to understand what their level of independence is. Um, it provides an opportunity for you to know how much support they need when they're asking for help at home, that it defines what sort of um, skills they can do and what they are going to keep working on in terms of sort of translating between activities. Can they take math skills and apply them in Creativity Lab? Can they take some of their literacy skills when they're in library and share them in another way? And we want to push kids towards that transfer of knowledge, that they aren't just using skills in one setting, but that they become more and more independent to take them and do other things. We also felt like a change really represented who we are as a school in terms of thinking about the whole child. We have had our progress reports be skill based for many years, and now it feels like it's time to have a scoring or grading system that aligns with a skill based progress report. And we talk about growth mindset a lot here in terms of empowering students to always have a growth mindset. And so we hope that progress reports and shifting the way we talk about them will help you all continue to inspire your students to have a growth mindset alongside teachers. So when they come home, you can talk about that level of independence with each skill. Also, if at any point you can type questions into the chat, I have some time set aside at the end for questions as well. So I'll keep an eye on that. So this was something we shared back in the fall, and I'm kind of going to walk through each level of the 5 point scale. We brought it up at back to school night just so that there was some information ahead of time, and you'll see a breakdown in your child's progress report this year that highlights what each of these levels is. And um, it's helpful to think of this as a year-long journey. Oftentimes, something that a first grader or a third grader or a fifth grader begins learning in September is something that they are supposed to be independent in by the end of the year. So when we think about this midpoint, we wouldn't really expect kids to be fully independent with potentially a skill in fractions because there's still 4 or 5 months of school left where they're going to continue to refine that practice and that skill. So we think about these in terms of numbers. Um, and so if we were thinking about, let's say, first grader learning about vowel teams, they're going to start vowel teams in the beginning of the year, but it's going to take several months for them to actually get through all of those lessons to learn all of the vowel teams, and then several more months for them to really practice them. So we might see a lot of threes for our students in first grade around that topic because they're still in the middle of teaching that skill. Students still need that guidance or those examples. So a one is really something you might see when a student hasn't learned a skill or it hasn't been presented, or if they need teacher guidance through the whole process, which is what teachers are here for, is really to guide students. You might see a two when a student needs more broken down scaffolding or instructions to get through a specific skill. If we're thinking about um, addition in first grade, you might have a student who needs a teacher to help get some supplies and count out an addition problem for 6 plus 5. And as they guide through, a student can sort of talk through it, but they need that adult to be there with them, which is also a very typical thing for a first grader in the beginning of the year. But then by now, we would hope that they might start to get those cubes themselves, need less teacher support, but have the occasional question. Um, a three is really, I think, the big number that I want to focus on today. A three is where we expect students to sort of be if they're in the depth of learning. They've been working on a skill, they're exploring it potentially on their own. Teachers provide a lot of anchor charts and resources on the board to help guide them without directly supporting them. And it's where students are essentially pushing themselves to try on their own, but also sort of having that safety net of a teacher there to support them as needed. Um, I've been looking through a lot of the examples, and I think what I look for is a three to show if a student is right where they should be in the middle of the school year. It tells me that they're on the right track towards mastering a skill or being ready to apply it, but that there's still a lot of lessons that are being taught each day to have students practice that work on a daily basis. Um, we have a four when students are starting to do something with significantly more independence and just the occasional mistake. Um, it might look like a fourth and fifth grader working with fractions on a pie, and they're starting to divide things up and find the right amounts and transfer them into those the fraction pieces. Um, and there might be the occasional challenge in finding the right number, but they have the concept and the idea of how to divide different shapes in different ways. Um, and a five is really like next level learning. We're thinking about how students take what they've learned and utilize it in a really different way. I like to think of it almost as teaching. Could that student take their knowledge of a skill and teach it to someone else, or take it to Spanish? And when Sylvia's doing a lesson, they might say, "Oh, wow, Sylvia, I actually just learned that word in social studies with my fourth grade teacher, and we're writing down the definition. Could you also help us define it in Spanish?" So we're really thinking about like that interdisciplinary approach. And I think oftentimes when we think of report cards, we want our kids to be at that highest level. And when we think about a 5 point scale, the goal is not necessarily to be always at a five. A four is showing us that they have really mastered that skill independently. A five tells us whether or not they are taking it beyond the classroom to do even more. So it's kind of that enrichment and extension phase that we see some kids break into. I tried to put this arrow on the bottom to show that it really highlights the progression of the whole year. We begin with our skill development, we practice and repeat over and over and over until students can start to utilize those skills on their own. Uh, which is essentially what they do when they transition grades. When we have students in fourth grade that wrap up the year, we want them to have more independence because when they get to fifth grade, new skills are being rolled out and they need to have that independence in order to move forward. One thing we also added was half points between each one because oftentimes students are in a transitional phase. As I looked through sort of the progress reports that teachers have been filling out over the past week, there are a lot of half points to show that maybe your students at 2.5, they have been needing step by step support, but they've started to just show the early stages of stepping back from that and just asking for occasional bits of help or reminders, or they're using those classroom resources more explicitly. Um, or a student might be a 4.5. They might be really independent and using that skill, and they might be just showing their teacher that their brain is kind of firing off ideas and connections between different classes, but they haven't quite used it in the classroom yet. They're expressing uh, that bridge that's forming, and they haven't quite figured out how to take that skill to the next level, but you can tell it's almost there. And I think the idea is that we really want to be more explicit and clear with families of where your student is on their journey. And the more classic letters feel a little bit more boxed in. When we say not meeting the standard, it doesn't give you a real sense of where they are, other than that they're not there, which uh, doesn't provide you what you need to help them at home. If anything, it leaves you wondering, okay, well, where are they? If they're not there, where are they? And I hope that this sort of system shows you, do they need you to be supporting them more directly? Do they need you to support them by checking in on occasion, but letting them explore on their own? Um, so I'm going to go to the next one. This is kind of an example of what they are looking like. This is a kindergarten literacy progress report section of just their early phonics pieces. And I think if we look closely, we can see that this student is independent in a couple skills. They need teacher guidance in a couple skills. They are starting to print their uppercase letters with less guidance. They're starting to sort of explore, I can do that on my own. And when I look at these sort of skills, spelling simple words, oftentimes you'll see we've put an asterisk, which indicates that this is something that they're going to work on all year. And we don't expect a kindergartner to be spelling words in January. So it makes sense that they need more direct adult support through the process. But by the end of the year, we want to see them closer to that 3 and 4, where they're able to do it more independently. So oftentimes you'll see these year-long pieces. Um, Maybe they'll start out representing that students need more adult support, and by the end of the year, they'll be more independent. Whereas some pieces are wrapping up at this point of the year. We're about halfway through. There are some skills on these progress reports that are kind of like, we're done and we're moving on to a new skill. We do expect more mastery. So you'll see some different numbers. I also have a fifth grade example. This is fifth grade math. So again, you'll see numbers kind of all over the place, which highlights that some of these standards are things that are sort of being taught and are being wrapped up at this point in the year. Students are sort of expected to have that independence, but some of them are just being started. Uh, my this friend here who is using place value to round decimals is just beginning that skill. We don't expect them to have mastery, but we want to make sure that we hone in on that because it's one of the things that they're going to focus on for the rest of the year. We get down to fractions, and they are showing that they are pretty independent and starting to be fully independent and are fully independent in a lot of their skills here. Um, so seeing a lot of different numbers is actually, I think, a really good thing. It lets you know where students are doing things by themselves and where you can jump in and figure out what kind of support that they need. Um, the idea of this change isn't to lower our expectations. It's designed to make them more clear for you as families to be able to have a conversation with your child or your child's teacher and get more specific information about how you can support at home and what things your child might need more support on or what things they can do on their own. And I think we're moving away from this idea that a 3 is not just average. It's right where we want your child to be. We think about, as teachers, we call it the zone of proximal development. It's where a child is being pushed at the just right level to keep growing. And when we see kids sort of at that level of they're getting little bits of support for teachers, they're using their resources, and they're starting to do it independently, it's where we really thrive. It's where teachers then know, I'm ready to sort of take this kid to the next level. They're pushing that boundary and they're ready to move into something different. And it's how teachers really guide their instruction. We use our flexible groups and our A2L time really strategically, and our support teachers, Lydia and Courtney, join teachers once a week to do thoughtful planning. And a lot of it comes from the different assessments that take place over the course of the year. When we are collecting, I'm going to go back one, this data. Hopefully, I can go back one. These data points are not collected from one assessment. They come from multiple opportunities that kids are assessed throughout the fall through sometimes a summative assessment. Sometimes it's a worksheet that they've done that the teacher has collected as a snapshot. Sometimes we're working on the rug in second grade and a teacher is just taking notes on a clipboard, watching. Are they doing it by themselves? Have I had to check in? So we have summative assessments, but we also use them in combination with all the other observations and the ways that teachers have sort of changed groups over time to reflect this information. I think also the goal is for you to be able to use these progress reports more intentionally at home to have conversations and plans of what to do to help support your child. I love this picture of our friend looking closely. So I tried to think of what is helpful for you as parents to do with a progress report. And I encourage you to look for patterns over the course of it instead of looking at single numbers. Is your child consistently at a 2.5 or a 3? Are they hovering on that perfect zone of thinking about what they're learning and trying it on their own? Are they a student who has a lot of fours and then some twos? It tells us they're really independent in a lot of ways, but there's a few pieces that they need more support on where we can partner at school and at home to make sure they get that extra boost that they need and also to read through those comments. The teacher narratives are so powerful. I've been reading them over the course of this week and last weekend, and there's so much detail in the specifics of what kids are working on in their groups or in their classes or with friends or with support teachers. And it really breaks it down for you beyond just the number. You might see that 2.5. And when you read the teacher comments, it's going to explain exactly why it's there. Uh, I also think that it's a good opportunity for you to ask questions. What is support looking like for my child? What type of enrichment are they getting? How can I help my child build independence in this specific skill? And we use progress reports to guide the work we do moving forward. Progress reports are really just a snapshot of time. And when we meet with you all again in March for parent teacher conference weekend, that's a continuation of this work. Our teachers are going to refer back to all of this information in your progress report and continue to point out the goals and things that kids are working on. And I think progress reports are a way for you as parents to support at home. I also think it's important not to worry. Again, those single numbers, they don't tell the whole story. We look for patterns across the report card or the progress report to show where students are really succeeding so that we can then think about what is working well there and what can we do to help them feel independent in other skills. Um, we don't use progress reports to compare students to others. We don't norm them like standardized tests or CTPs. They are here to reflect your child and your child alone. Um, you should not expect fives across the board. A five would show us fives across the board would be that students are just basically taking everything and teaching all people in other places. It's developmentally appropriate for a student to be at a 3 and a 4 with independence. And to have the occasional five, I think shows passion in a subject. It lets you know sort of where your child is standing out in their personal interests and identities and talents to be taking a skill and doing something deeper with it. And the idea is that scores are not permanent. They're changing over time. We want to see growth in that independence. We want to see a 3 now turn into a 4 at the end of the year. We want to see a 2.5 grow to a 3 or 4 to show that your child has been practicing a skill repeatedly and is starting to really utilize it on their own. And by the end of the year, we do want to see students between those threes and fours. I put this last quote. Progress reports are meant to just inform instruction, celebrate growth, and guide next steps. We don't want to label a student as below standard or not meeting expectations. We want to really use that positive language to also inspire students to keep having that growth mindset, to keep moving forward. And a few other things that were really important. For our fifth grade families, we have benchmarked progress reports differently for the purpose of middle school applications. We don't want to send a document on to middle school that says your child is not yet independent. So we have benchmarked fifth grade at a half year point, and teachers have submitted numbers that are reflected of sort of are they as independent as they should be at this moment in time rather than facing sort of an end of year standard. So you will see slightly different scores with your fifth grader at this moment in time because of their journey in education. But for our pre-K through four students, we're working on that year-long growth model. Um, and how will you know if your child is struggling or excelling? As I've been reading the progress reports that are out, there are very detailed comments that point out when a child is getting enrichment from a group or a certain teacher, when a child is getting support, and how often that is happening, and exactly what skills they're working on. And I think it's important to note that sometimes a child might need support on one skill like fractions, but they might have really strong algebraic thinking. And so we don't want to label a student as sort of needing support in math because they can be um, independent in some parts of math and need support in others. And that's completely, it's expected and typical. And so that information is written down even more explicitly. And I think the idea is, as we looked at that math example, you can see exactly which skills students were needing support in and which skills they were independent with throughout the course of the year. And then you'll see the same at the end of the year of what types of support or growth they have made. I think that might be my last bit of information. I appreciate you all sticking with me. I didn't see any questions come through, but if you have any questions, you are welcome to shout them out or type them in, um, and I will jump in and answer.
Question. I just want to say thank you very much for giving up your time to walk us through this new process. It's really appreciated since I was not at the back to school night and I had no idea we were changing our schooling system.
Yes, I'm also sending out a letter before progress reports or alongside them that highlights all of this as well. And I talked to Christy today, and she's going to help me link this into the letter so that parents can read it and watch it because I figure that people have missed that detail. But I appreciate you for taking time today to come and listen.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Sean. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I saw one. How does this reflect other schools and middle school progress report structure? Um, that's a really good question. I don't think I know exactly what a ton of other schools do. I know that typically as kids move up, we shift more towards that GPA system where every class has more of a total amount of points you can earn. I believe most middle schools are more transition based so that when kids get to upper schools, they're more prepared. Um, so we wanted to make sure that for our fifth graders, we had a system that highlighted independence, but also still showed where they should be with their scores, so that there was some correlation.
Cool. Thank you. Sorry, I typed it out because my voice is pretty
No,
raw.
I appreciate it had me looking everywhere. I appreciate it.
And thank you for your time, though, Sean. I really appreciate you like filling us all in and taking the time to do these lunchtime parent
No
ed sessions.
problem. I
Yeah,
appreciate you all for taking your lunches to join me. I think any feedback is really helpful as we sort of keep creating topics. We've scheduled a couple for this year, and our hope is to sort of find the best time and place to provide more opportunities to have some parent education of what's happening at school or during school, um, and finding the best avenue feels really important.
totally. Keep them coming. That's my feedback.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate all of your time, and if there are not other questions right now, I will wrap it up. All right. Thanks, everybody, and I will see you soon.